Okay, here's the continuation of the video I just did about how you can avoid doing factoring. Okay, this video is called Bluff Your Way Through Factoring. Bluffing means, like, in a poker game when you pretend you got a better hand than you really have. So in this case, you're kind of pretending that you know how to do factoring even though you really don't. Okay, and it's pretty easy to do. Okay, let me show you how you pretend you know how to do factoring. Okay, so we're going to start with like a hard factoring problem like the one I just gave you above. Okay, so they're going to say, oh, find the x values which make this true. Okay, and like normally what you do with factoring is you start listing all the factors that are possible, and then you start trial and erroring through them, trying to figure out which one's right, and then you fill in this little thing here. Okay, and then you're like, hey, here's the answer. Okay, and even after you do that, you still need to continue on and actually find the solution, which is like x equals 2 and x equals 5 or whatever. You need to go that far. Okay, so even through all the pain and suffering of factoring, you're only going this far. You're not getting to the end. Okay, now you already know a way to avoid doing factoring, which is called quadratic formula. Okay, and I don't know if you thought quadratic formula was great or if you thought it was terrible, but if you thought it was terrible and you're also not good at factoring, then you didn't really understand what quadratic formula did for you. Okay, quadratic formula gets you out of factoring ever again, because remember the 3 reasons why I told you that factoring is bad? Okay, there's 3 cases where factoring either doesn't work or it's hard to do. Well, quadratic formula solves all those cases. Okay, so if you know how to do quadratic formula, you do not need to ever do factoring, and sometimes factoring doesn't even work anyway. Okay, so quadratic formula, you might not have it memorized, and that's okay, because in the IB, I can't write and remember the quadratic formula at the same time because I need to say the quadratic formula. Okay, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, if I don't say it, I can't write it. Okay, so now, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so on the formula sheet for the IB exam, the quadratic formula is there, so you don't even need to memorize it. But after you do a few problems, you're going to memorize it anyway, but you do not need to memorize it. So if you're not too sure about it, always go back to the formula sheet and copy it down again, because that would be a real shame to lose a whole bunch of points on a problem because you wrote quadratic formula down wrong. I've seen people do that. It's a real shame. Okay, so what is the a, b, and c here? The a, b, and c here corresponds to the coefficients of the quadratic that they give you. Okay, so the first one is a, the second one is b, the third one is c. Sometimes they want to trick you by putting the terms in the wrong order. So, like, do you see how x squared is first, x to the first is second, and x to the 0, or no x term is, or no x variable in the third term? They're put in order of decreasing degree, right? If they put it in a different order, you have to rearrange it. Okay, sometimes they try to trick you by doing that. Okay, so b is negative 4, c is negative 10, right? And a is 6. Now, so it's like, it doesn't matter what a, b, and c and are, it's always the same level of difficulty. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute the b and the a and the c with this b and a and c, and that will give me both of the answers. Okay, so negative b would be negative of negative 4. Okay, now quadratic formula does require you to be good at substitution, which I don't think is really asking too much. I mean, it's not like it's going to be harder than factoring. Factoring is already pretty difficult as far as math goes. Okay, that I ran out of space there. And then 2a, 6. Okay, so I'm going to have x equals negative negative 4, which is positive 4, plus or minus the square root, and then negative 4 inside the parentheses squared is negative 4 times negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Very possible to make algebra errors here if you're not good with parentheses. So get good at parentheses. Okay, Then 4 times 6 is 24, and then you multiply that times negative 10, right? And then on the bottom, we have 2 times 6, which is 12. Okay. Now we can kind of separate these out. We can have 4 over 12 plus or minus, and then on top we have 16 minus 24 minus 10. 24 times 10 is 240. So that's 16 plus 240, because negative times negative is positive. And then divided by 12 here. Okay? And, sorry, that's... Okay. And you don't have to... You might not be good at reducing fractions. If you can't tell that that's 1/3, go ahead and leave 4/12. IB doesn't really care about reducing fractions. 240 plus 16 is 256. Square root of 256 divided by 12. Okay? And actually, you're kind of done. Now, that might not look like a good answer to you. I'm going to simplify it a little bit. 1/3, because 4/12 is 1/3, plus square root of 256 divided by 12. Okay? And then the other solution, there's two solutions here. This is positive or negative, right? So this is the positive one. The negative one is 1/3 minus square root of 256 divided by 12. Okay? And so these are the two possible solutions which give you this value of 0 here if you substitute it in. Okay? And if you write this out, you're going to get most of the points, if not all. Okay? You're like, that looks really unsimplified, and it is unsimplified. But a lot of times, an unsimplified answer is going to get you all the points anyway. Okay? Let me show you, just for curiosity, how you simplify this. Okay? This is probably the hardest part of it, just simplifying these fractions. Okay. Square root of 256. If you're doing it like this, it's because maybe you don't have the calculator, maybe it's the non-calculator portion. Square root of 256, that looks familiar. 256, if you've ever played that that iPhone app game, 1024 or whatever, you might remember 256. 256 is a exponent of 2. I think it's 16 times 16. Okay, so the square root of 256 is actually 16. So I'm going to simplify this. 1/3 plus 16 divided by 12. 16 divided by 12 is actually 8 divided by 6, which is actually 4 divided by 3. Oh, look, 1/3 plus 4/3, that's 5/3. So one of the roots is 5/3. The other root is 1/3 minus 16 divided by 12 also, which is 1/3 minus 4/3. Negative 1. Okay? So one of the roots is 5/3, one of the roots is negative 1. Okay, now how would you bluff your way into making them think that you know how to do factoring? Well, what you could write up here, I'm just going to copy this here, down to here, and then I'm going to complete the factoring, okay? So I'm going to say, oh yeah, factoring. So I know that there's two things here. Okay, so one of these is going to be x minus 5/3, because this is one of the zeros, and the other one is going to be x plus 1. Okay, now do you see how this is positive 5/3, and I put a negative 5/3 here, and there's a negative 1 here, and I put the positive 1 here? Okay, that's something that may be not intuitive that you have to do. Okay, and the last thing you have to do is you need to take the a coefficient and put it here. Okay, because to make it come out to be like this, you need to have a leading coefficient that's the same as that one. Okay, so and now I've completed it. This is it factored. Okay, if you want to make it look like you want to fake them out more that you really did it by hand, you can multiply the 6 into this one here. You're going to put 6x minus 30 divided by 3 is 10. So I'm going to... Okay, and so this one is probably what you get if you really did it by hand. Okay, but if you do it with quadratic formula, you're going to get this here. And you may look at that and you might say, wow, that algebra was so hard that it's not worth learning this. I'll just stick with factoring. But the thing is, we need to use quadratic formula in MathSL for a couple other things. Okay, so you're not going to get out of using quadratic formula anyway. Okay, so quadratic formula is something that you have to use. Factoring is something you can always substitute quadratic formula with. Okay, so that's just a suggestion in case you need to make some choices about what you're going to learn for the quadratics unit. One of the things that maybe you can avoid learning if you haven't learned it already is factoring.